Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
Well, I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anybody can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Oh, Lane, by the way, I saw from your book that last Thursday night, when Lord Shoreham and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are ended as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Yes. Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I've observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens, is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have had very little experience of it myself up to the present. I've only been married once. There was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know if I'm that interested in your family life, Lane.
It is not very interesting, sir. I do not think much of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, then what on earth is the use of them? They appear, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
Dear Earnest, how are you? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure. What else would bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algie.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
Oh, in the country.
What on earth do you do there?
Well, when one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours.
Got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire, why, yes, of course. Hello, why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young?
Well, Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen are coming to tea.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well, but I'm afraid that Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It's almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
Oh, I thought you'd come up for pleasure. I'd call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
Well, I don't see anything romantic in proposing. I mean, it is very romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. And then the excitement is all over. You see, the very essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, dear Algie. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There's no use speculating on that subject. Divorces were made in heaven. And please, don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
But you have been eating them all the time.
That is quite a different matter. She's my aunt. Here, have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter this is too.
Well, my dear fellow, you need not eat as if you're going to eat it all. You act as if you are married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
That is nonsense.
It isn't. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors that one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin. And before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the entire question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily.
Lay, fetch me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you had let me know. I have been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
Well, there's no use offering a large reward now that this thing is found.
I think that is rather mean of you, Earnest, I must say. However, now that I look at the inscription inside, I find that the thing's of yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen it with me 100 times and no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read inside a private cigarette case.
It's absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I'm quite aware of that fact, Algie, but I don't propose to discuss modern culture here. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily. And you just said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady, lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily? Aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells. It says here, Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall and some aunts are not so tall. Surely, that is a matter an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be like your aunt. Now that is absurd. For heaven's sake, just give me...
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle? It says here, from Little Cecily with her fondest love, to dear Uncle Jack. Now, there is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. Why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it's Earnest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
Well, you've always told me it was Ernest. I have introduced you to him as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. You're the most Ernest-looking person I've ever seen in my life. It's probably absurd you're saying that your name isn't Ernest. Why, it's on your card. Here's one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, before the Albany. I'll keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if you ever attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolen, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and this cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Well, yes, but that does not account for the fact that your little Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear Uncle Jack. Come on, boy, you'd much better have the thing out at once.
You talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now, go on. You should tell me the entire thing. I may mention that I've always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression once you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now produce your explanation. And pray, make it improbable.
There's nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was just a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle from motives of respect you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the care of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
And where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, my dear fellow. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you quite frankly that place is not in Shropshire.
No, I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have Bunburyed all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, I don't know whether you'll be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. You see, when one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. And as a very high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to one's health or happiness, in order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Ernest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algie, is the truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
Now that wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You should leave that to people who haven't been at a university. They do it so well in the daily papers. No, what you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying that you're a Bunburyist. In fact, you are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother by the name of Earnest, in order that you might be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid by the name of Bunbury, in order that I might be able to go down to the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with him tonight at Willis's. For I have been really engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know, you're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
I think you had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta tonight.
No, I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I am treated as a member of the family, and either sent down with one with no woman at all, or two. In the third place, I know perfectly well whom she will place me next to tonight. She will place me next to Mary Barqua, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent. And that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily's a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Earnest, and I strongly advise you to do the same with with your invalid friend with the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to me to be extremely problematic, you'll be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. If I ever marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, and she is the only girl I ever saw that I would marry, I certainly wouldn't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to understand, my friend, that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
That, my dear young fellow, is the corrupt theory that the French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home is proved in half the time.
Don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
No, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. Ah, that must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I can get her out of the way for 10 minutes, so that you can have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Auntie Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing.